Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The Prophet's companions were people who lived during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, believed in him, and died in a state of Islam. They have a special position in Islam because they were the first generation to receive Islamic teachings directly from the Prophet. A friend of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam participated in the Battle of Uhud. However, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam stated that he was an expert on hell. Who was he and what did he do that the Prophet called him an expert in hell? Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Hopefully this video will be useful for all of us. In the midst of the Muslim army during the Battle of Uhud, there was a hypocrite who took part in the battle. His name was Quzman. At first, he was reluctant to join the Muslim army because he was hurt by the Prophet's statement that he was an expert in hell. Therefore, he chose to stay at home when the Muslims left for the battlefield. The next day, after the departure of the Muslim army, some women from Bani Jafar came to Quzman. They mocked him and said, "Oh Quzman, the people went out to fight while you just stayed at home. Aren't you ashamed? You should be ashamed because you just stayed at home like a woman." Quzman did not answer a word. Instead of replying, he tried to avoid them. However, the women continued to chase him and said again, "Indeed, you are like a woman. Your people went out to fight while you just sit comfortably at home." Hearing these insults, Quzman's pride was ignited. He felt angry because he was constantly criticized by the women. With overflowing anger, he rushed into the house, then came back out carrying his sword, spear, and shield. After that, he mounted his riding animal and immediately moved towards Uhud to catch up with Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and the Muslim troops. When Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was tidying up the troops, Quzman walked from the back row to the front row. Later, when the war was raging, he was among the Muslim troops who first threw spears. Quzman is known to be skilled at throwing spears. His throw flew far and lightly like an arrow. He fought with great courage while shouting loudly. After throwing the spear, he drew his sword, then swung it fiercely to attack the enemy. The Muslims who witnessed his bravery were amazed and wondered, could a person who fights like this be an expert in hell? For them, Quzman's sincerity and courage in fighting were so extraordinary that it seemed impossible that he would be included in the group of experts in hell. During the Battle of Uhud, the Quraysh standard-bearers became the main targets of the Muslim troops. When Abu Sa'id held the banner, Sa'd bin Abi Waqqash managed to kill him. After that, the banner of the polytheists was taken over by Mas'afi bin Abi Talha, but he became an easy target for Muslim troops. The spear thrown by Ashim bin Thabit bin Abi al-Aqla injured Mas'afi's body until he staggered, still trying to hold the banner. Because they were getting weaker and could no longer stand, the Quraysh banner was finally carried by his brother, Al-Harith bin Talha. However, again Ashim attacked him and succeeded in killing him. The banner of the polytheists then passed into the hands of Mas'afi and Al-Harith's brother, namely Kilab bin Abi Talha. However, he was eventually killed by Quzman. That's when the Muslims became increasingly amazed at him. They praised Quzman while asking themselves, can a person like this be an expert in hell? Surah bin Kami took the banner of the polytheists and moved quickly towards the ranks of the Muslims, as if only to meet his death. He was finally killed, slashed by the sword of a Muslim. The banner of Quraysh was then carried by Sawab, a slave belonging to the Abdud Dar family. Quzman blocked and ambushed him, then slashed his right hand. However, Sawab continued to defend the banner with his left hand. Quzman continued to press, then slashed his left hand until it was severed. Even so, Sawab still tried to protect the banner of Quraysh with both of his arms, hugging it tightly while protecting it with his back. In his dying state, he shouted, "O Bani Abdud Dar, will you surrender?" However, Quzman did not give him a chance any longer. The sharp and fast flash of his sword pierced Sawab's body until he lay lifeless. He fell prostrate, like the sons of Talha who had fallen in defense of the banner of the polytheists. Quzman continued to fight fiercely, swinging his sword, slashing, and felling anyone who stood in his way. In his ears, the criticism and insults of the women in his village still rang. "You are no different from a woman. You want to go to war while you only sit comfortably at home." His blood boiled hot every time he remembered their words. He wanted to prove to everyone that he was a real man, a brave and tough fighter. No one was allowed to call him a woman, and he truly showed his courage. Many of the Quraysh had fallen at his hands. He continued to move nimbly, breaking through enemy lines, slashing anyone who stood in his way. The voices of the women in his village continued to ring in his head, as if they had never disappeared from his eardrums. Their words became a fire that further fueled his fighting spirit. When the Muslims felt that victory was in their grasp, they began to busy collecting the spoils of war. Meanwhile, Quzman continued to attack the Quraysh relentlessly. However, after fighting for quite some time, his sword finally broke. Unarmed, he shouted, "Death is better than fleeing from the battlefield. O people, fight to the death and do as I do." Then he ran quickly to charge the polytheist troops. The Muslims who saw him said, "He will surely be killed." However, not long after, he was seen coming out of the polytheist ranks again and shouting, "Face me! I am a Safarite." Then he jumped again and charged the polytheist ranks. The Muslims who witnessed him said, "He will surely be killed this time." However, not long after, he appeared again and shouted, "Face me! I am a Safarite." Not long after that, Ka'ab bin Malik, who had suffered quite serious injuries due to the counterattack of the Quraysh troops, saw Quzman coming out of the polytheist ranks again. In front of him, Khalid bin al-Uqayli appeared and blocked him. The two fought fiercely, but Quzman was still too strong for Khalid. It didn't take long for Quzman to slash his sword and slash Khalid's neck until he fell sprawling. Before Khalid died, he had time to attack the Muslims while shouting, "Gather them as you gather sheep for grazing." Khalid bin al-Uqayli, who was wearing armor and a war helmet, shouted again, "O Quraysh, do not kill Muhammad. Capture and hold him captive until we find out what he can do." After killing Khalid bin al-Uqayli, Quzman took his sword and left. At that time, he saw horsemen from Quraysh whose face was not visible except for his two eyes. Quzman jumped to attack and swung his sword until the horseman fell down. It turned out that the person was al-Walid bin al-Ash bin Hisham al-Makhzumi. When the Muslim troops began to straighten their ranks after experiencing panic due to the counterattack of the Quraysh, which destroyed their defenses, Quzman continued to fight. He swung his sword at every enemy he faced. By that time, he had killed 7 Quraysh, even though his own body was covered in wounds. When the Muslim army began to reorganize its ranks, Quzman met Qatada bin al-Numan. Qatada greeted him and said, "O Abu al-Raida." Quzman replied, "Yes, it is I." Qatada bin al-Numan then said, "I congratulate you because you have achieved martyrdom." However, Quzman's answer was surprising. With a weak and faltering voice, he said, "By Allah, I am not fighting because of my religion. I am fighting solely for my pride. When the Quraysh came to attack, I faced them." Blood continued to flow from his wounds, making his face even paler. His body weakened, and he began to groan in great pain. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, Quzman took an arrow and stabbed himself with it. He died by suicide. It is true what the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, said when he spoke about Quzman, that he was an expert in hell. This is a little story about Quzman, a man who fought bravely on the battlefield, but he did not get a good ending. In fact, he became an expert in hell. What was his mistake? Hopefully we can learn lessons and wisdom from this story. Hopefully this video is useful for all of us. True story, friends. See you in the next video.